certain number of rings, you know, certain number of clangs on the bell signifies a certain time of day.
And you still use the bell here occasionally?
We use the bell here occasionally, yes, for lunchtime, lunch break for the volunteers.
Here is the Zeidler Humanities Room at the Milwaukee Central Library. The volunteers are sailors or former sailors, people whose relatives sail the lakes, or those who simply have an intense interest in Great Lakes history. The Great Lakes Marine Collection is part of the library. The volunteers belong to the Wisconsin Marine Historical Society, formed 40 years ago.
The society itself is a group of people who are interested in the lakes and want to work on this collection, come in here and help in preservation, in indexing, putting things in boxes where they can be found so that when people want to study them, they know where they are at. Scholars are interested in the collection. People who are interested in history are interested in the collection. Genealogists, because of course Milwaukee, in its early founding, is indistinguishable from lake commerce. Lake commerce and the prosperity of the city of Milwaukee were one and the same. And so you can't understand Milwaukee without understanding the Great Lakes and without understanding what took place in the Great Lakes. And as I said to you before, this is one of the rarest and finest collections on the Great Lakes that exists anywhere.
The collection offers an endless source for professional or personal research, and for the volunteers an opportunity to be a part of our city's history. Jack Godden has been a volunteer since 1987.
At first I thought I could put my newly learned computer skills to use was some of the yacht plans and boat vessel plans that we had. And being a model builder, I thought, well, this is a natural. I can at least put that on paper. So we documented that, and that was on the first apples that the library had.
With more sophisticated computers now, the Society, like the library, has an internet site. But it's the nuts and bolts of logbooks, charts, plans, and photographs that are a staple of their work.
Well, the paper collection is perhaps the most outstanding. You know, the records and the Great Lakes ships. We say we are the Great Lakes history base, the research base. Having it in a federal repository like they have here at the public library is the place for it. And it's a place we hope that more people find out what we've got.
Some of that research is done on simple scraps of paper, many of them from Milwaukeean Herman Runge, who devoted almost 70 years of his life to all aspects of Great Lakes activities. The Runge collection, which forms the cornerstone of the ship file collection, was acquired when he died in 1958. It includes information on 85,000 ships with 17,000 photographs. While primarily a source for reference and research and not a museum, the collection does have a small number of ship models and some artifacts.
Well, we have a great deal of material off of the Christopher Columbus, which was a famous whaleback vessel that plied the lakes between Milwaukee and Chicago. It was a great tourist vessel, and we have the ship's wheel and a number of windows from out of it and some of the other artifacts off of that ship. We have name boards off of vessels, many of them off sunken vessels, which were brought up by divers over the years.
Many Milwaukee residents can remember seeing the giant iron ore boats wintered in the harbor. Many will remember the passenger ship Milwaukee Clipper and a ride to Muskegon, Michigan. But here and around the country, people have heard of the loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald, the 729-foot freighter lost in Lake Superior in 1975.
The Edmund Fitzgerald was built by Northwestern Mutual, which financed the construction of the vessel. And they named it after their chairman of the board, Mr. Edmund Fitzgerald, who was one of the founders of this society. And of course, that wreck is probably the most famous wreck, other maybe than the Lady Elgin. And a good part of the Irish community in Milwaukee went to Chicago for a big celebration and was coming back with their own band and their own marching societies and everything. And the ship went down, and of course with a vast loss of life and a very big tragedy for the Irish community in Milwaukee.
The Milwaukee Public Library and Wisconsin Marine Historical Society get questions from throughout the world on the Great Lakes Marine Collection. They welcome your interest in both the collection and membership in the society.
You do become a part of it. You do become a part of it. The big thing is just to try to get people to show a little bit more interest. They've got a tremendous history source here.
Over 177 years of Great Lakes maritime history is at your fingertips at the Central Library. Volunteers say you can almost become a part of that history.
I sort of would like to spend a day or two maybe on one of these old sailing schooners, you know, in good weather, with good food and a short haul. But it is, you're touching on a little bit of history and a little bit of America, you know, and how they survived is beyond me. And how, you know, what they passed on to us is what we've got. So we just pass it on back to the future generations. It would be a great achievement.
Milwaukee should be proud of its maritime traditions, and Milwaukee should be very proud of this collection because this collection chronicles that maritime history.
Would the members of the Common Council please rise for your oath of office? Members of the Common Council.
Newly elected Council President Marvin Pratt, the second African-American to hold the post, presided over the inaugural ceremonies. The historic and ornate chamber of the Common Council was packed with city officials, members of their families, friends, and constituents. The 17 council members pledged to support the Constitution and to faithfully discharge the duties of their office to the best of their ability. They had the opportunity to introduce their families and friends, thank those who voted for them, and in some cases, talk about the future.
7 council members under the age of 40. I'm looking forward to that. I think it bodes well for our city and for our neighborhoods, and I look forward to working with them and my past colleagues as we steer Milwaukee into a new century.
I like prayers that talk about justice and about human values and human needs and meeting them. That's what aldermen are for. That's what we're for, and I'm looking forward to doing it.
I want to thank my colleagues. I'm looking forward to working with you for the next 4 years. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be exciting. And I think the city of Milwaukee will move toward more greatness with this august body.
We stand here with family and friends and well-wishers alike. I think we should take stock in our own ability. I believe we have an unlimited capacity for leadership, and I think we should strive to achieve more, to be better, and to raise the level of expectations for both this body and for the people we represent.
With the retirement of Alderman John Colwitz and Wayne Frank, Alderwoman Marlene Johnson Odom is now the senior member in terms of service with 20 years on the Common Council. The oath of office was then given to other constitutional officers. City Treasurer Wayne Widow was sworn in for a 7th time. City Comptroller W. Martin Morix took the oath of office for a 3rd time, and Municipal Court Judge Vincent Bobbitt was sworn into his first full term. City Attorney Grant Langley was not able to attend the ceremony. Milwaukee Mayor John Norquist then took the oath of office to formally begin his 4th term. In his inaugural address, the city's 37th chief executive talked of education, job creation, strong neighborhoods, and crime. He announced that Woody Welch, a member of the Fire and Police Commission, and Dr. Roy Neighbors, a pastor and former alderman, will chair the Milwaukee Anti-Crime Commission. A report is due August 1st.
But in the meantime, their charge is clear. Develop strategies to reduce crime by half, by 50%. It's an ambitious goal, but the law-abiding citizens of Milwaukee deserve nothing less. And I want the commission to focus on violent crime, homicides rates, getting guns and drugs off the streets, cooperation with parole and probation agents to keep better tabs on offenders, and an examination of alcohol and drug treatment, domestic abuse programs to stem the tide of domestic violence in our community. While the battle against crime must be our priority, we must also make our schools vessels of learning that will carry our children into productive lives. The measure of our success should be the high school graduation rate, which has made progress, but not much progress. It's gone from under 50% graduation rate to a little bit over 50%, and that's not enough. We want to reach and eventually surpass the state average of 89%. And we have our work cut out for us, but we can do it if we make it a priority. I want to reaffirm my commitment to holding down spending and taxes, to leaving money in the pockets of Milwaukeeans instead of in the government treasury. After 6 years of frozen state shared revenue, though, it gets more difficult every year. Without a modest increase, just a modest increase, but a modest increase in those revenues, we will have reached the point where we may be forced to choose between reducing the quality of basic services or raising local tax revenues. And I pledge to fight for our fair share of those revenues. Cities cannot fight crime, fight fire, provide effective city services without the shared revenue that's been part of the state tax system since 1911. I look forward to working with President Marvin Pratt. I look forward to working with each and every member of this council. And I believe that Milwaukee is a great city that can be even greater. I believe in Milwaukee, and I believe that the best of Milwaukee's future lies ahead of it. Thank you very much.
The illustration on the front of the Layton Park poster incorporates details of area churches, all important landmarks in the neighborhood from Burnham to Oklahoma, 22nd to 37th Streets. In 1893, a group of German residents organized Gethsemane Lutheran Church. Layton Park Lutheran Church was established 15 years later. Holy Ghost, now St. Raphael, was built in 1902 to serve German Catholics. That church has been consolidated with the former St. Barbara's. That parish started at 32nd and Beecher to serve Polish Catholics in 1924. Then as now, the area was not exclusive to those two ethnic groups, and they, of course, were not the first residents of the neighborhood.
It was an Indian settlement, and it was at the outskirts of the city. And as development moved through, it began to change. The Plank Road went through first, the Janesville Plank Road. We now know that as Forest Home Avenue. Farmers were able to bring merchandise into the city along the Plank Road. They paid tolls. Over the years, that toll booth moved further and further west as development came through.
Development began at what is now the intersection of Lincoln and Forest Home Avenues. The early settlers who gave the neighborhood its name were also among the first to commute to work downtown.
A couple of early settlers were John and Frederick Layton. They had a meat market in the downtown area and needed a place to graze cattle. They bought farmland at about 25th and Janesville Plank Road, and eventually realized that there were a lot of farmers moving through that area that might like a stopover, and so they built a hotel.
The hotel, known as the Layton House, opened in 1849 at what is now the western corner of Forest Home and Lincoln Avenues. The shell of that wayside inn is still visible today. John Layton operated the hotel for several years before becoming one of the leading meatpackers in the city. Son Frederick Layton became one of Milwaukee's wealthiest citizens. He gave the city its first public art gallery, the Layton Art Gallery. Demolished in 1958, it stood on the northeast corner of Jefferson and Mason. The hotel was the first non-agricultural development in the area. Across the road a year later, in 1850, Forest Home Cemetery began to develop. With few public parks, the cemetery with a burial roster of who's who of early Milwaukee became a tourist attraction. It became so well known that the Janesville Plank Road was renamed Forest Home Avenue in 1872, the only street in Milwaukee history to be named for a graveyard. Newcomers began to plant other crops where the Indians had grown corn.
A man named Henry Griswold Comstock decided to buy some land in that area on 27th Street in the town of Greenfield. So his land went from 27th to 35th and Burnham to Lapham. It was a bog area. And he told people he was going to grow celery, and they all decided no, there was no way anybody was going to grow celery in this area. And he did, and in fact, over the years, they grew probably 6 million stalks of celery. The farm gave work to a lot of the immigrant people who moved into the area. Not long after the turn of the century, the development started moving in, and Comstock sold his farm, and houses were built on it. And if you drive down Layton Boulevard today and look on the west side of the street, you'll see that it was indeed a bog, and many of those homes have settled, and porches are rather unusual in the way they tilt.
As in some other neighborhoods, railroads played a big part in development. The Chicago and Northwestern laid the tracks along the bank of the Kinnickinnick River and crossed Forest Home at today's 33rd Street. In 1887, only 2 years after the main line was finished, a group of real estate promoters subdivided the old Layton farm and named the development Layton Park. It became a popular area for expanding industries, and by 1900 was an industrial district of some importance. Many of the homes along Layton Boulevard north of Lincoln Avenue were built between 1910 and 1930 by those who owned area industries. Lined with imposing homes of merchants, professionals, and manufacturers, it became one of the most prestigious addresses on the South Side. The boulevard was named a historic district in 1996.
Layton Boulevard was one of the series of boulevards that were planned in the late 1890s by the Park Commission. The intent was to connect parks by boulevards, and Layton Boulevard was to connect Mitchell Park, which was one of the original parks, with Forest Home Cemetery, which was a park-like area, and then eventually with Jackson Park. It was then the address that was sought after by people, and many of the people who moved there were people who had been living in the Walker's Point area and wanted to move out to an area with much larger homes and larger lots. And so that area started developing. And there's still some absolutely gorgeous homes on Layton Boulevard.
Layton Park's homes match those that developers built in other Milwaukee neighborhoods between 1890 and 1950. One small section has a special significance, though, with 6 residences designed by Frank Lloyd Wright.
That whole series of homes on Burnham, there are 4 duplexes and 2 single-family homes, 2 cottages, were all part of what Frank Lloyd Wright was developing. He called it his American system-built homes, and this was to be for the middle-income people.
Layton Park at first was a part of the town of Greenfield. Annexation of the city of Milwaukee took place in stages from 1903 to 1926. The 2 major original ethnic groups in Layton Park were the Germans and Poles. They remain well represented, but large numbers of Hispanics and Asians have added to the area's ethnic mix. In some ways, the Layton Park neighborhood is unique. In other ways, very similar to other older Milwaukee neighborhoods. Historians say we should all learn a bit more about the neighborhoods in which we live.
Because the history is who we are and what we are and why we are the way we are. Milwaukee is the city it is because of its neighborhoods. And we need to know what made each one of those neighborhoods unique, and we need to know what continues to make them unique. They all have their story, they all have their history, and they all have contributed something to make Milwaukee the great city it is.
There are many projects in the city of Milwaukee, large and small, for commercial developers and homeowners that require a permit from the city. These permits are aimed at ensuring the health, safety, and welfare of city residents and visitors. A complex maze in the City Hall complex greeted many who needed permits in the past. You might go to City Hall, then to Public Works on the municipal building's 7th floor, then up to building inspection on the 10th. A side trip to the Department of City Development in the 809 North Broadway building might be next, Then you could go back to the municipal building to see the health department on the first floor, Public Works again, this time on the fifth floor, and perhaps the waterworks down on the fourth. And each department had its own preliminary contact, review process, and approval. Introducing the Milwaukee Development Center on the first floor at 809 North Broadway, now the one-stop shop for most city design and permit functions.
We have a lot of different kinds of customers that come here to the Development Center looking for property information. We have attorneys, we have appraisers, we have people who are looking for historical information on different buildings. A lot of our customers are residential property owners who are interested in finding out if there's a copy of a survey on record for their property. They may be contemplating putting an addition on their home, building a garage, putting up a fence, or they simply want to know where their lot lines are located.
At the ceremonial opening, officials cut what they called years' worth of government red tape.
After decades, it seems like centuries of carping and complaining about the rotten city permitting policy and how we were torturing developers, commercial real estate people, causing one problem after another, we finally got around to fixing the problem.
Since the center opened, many people have said it doesn't look like a government office.
And I guess even more astounding than the appearance of the office is the fact that we don't operate like a government office. Under Mayor Norquist's leadership for the past 12 years, as city government, we've been working very hard to really be more customer focused, to streamline our processes and to organize around our customers instead of around our own bureaucracy.
What's happened now is that we've changed from what I would call an adversarial mentality that approaches the city of Milwaukee in development to a customer-friendly. It's interesting that both the mayor and Julie used that term customer with some degree of regularity in their remarks. I look forward to it. I look forward to bringing value to the city, and I think that each and everybody here present and those that will be coming through these doors will find this to be a wonderful way to make Milwaukee a great place, getting greater and greater.
The center brings staff from various locations throughout city government to one site. Here's what you'll find.
Okay, when you walk through our doors, the first person you're going to see is our receptionist. You want to stop and check in with her because she's going to ask you a few questions, and she's the person who is going to best direct you to the person or the area that you need to be in. She may direct you to one of the reviewers if you're here to apply for a permit, or if you're a contractor applying for either an electrical permit or some kind of plumbing permit or a water permit. She'll direct you to one side of the stairs where our walk-up stations are, and our reviewers are there and ready to help you with that. Or she may refer you to the other side of our stairway, which is our property information section. There you can find thousands and thousands of permit records that are filed by address and kept on microfilm. Merely walk up to one of our staff people at the property information section and let them know what address it is that you're interested in. They will collect all of the microfilm data that's available, and if you need assistance on using our equipment, they'd be happy to show you how to use our microfilm readers as well as our microfilm printers.
An open staircase to the second floor links the development center to DCD's planning, real estate, and economic development offices. The backdrop to the staircase is a large reproduction of an old city master plan from the early 1800s. The display separates the property information section from the area for such things as plan review and construction permits.
Those people are primarily there to help you with any kind of construction or permit questions that you may have. They will, right at the walk-up station, issue many different types of permits. Fence permits, small addition permits perhaps, different kinds of permits. If you're opening up a business, you need to apply for an occupancy certificate. They can help you with that. They're also available for just general information. I'm thinking of doing this. Is that possible at this location? So they're available for a number of different types of questions or information. At that location, again, also our technical staff that issues permits in the public right-of-way. If you're doing a construction project, even if it's a small residential project and you have a small yard and you need to have a dumpster out there, but you have to locate it in the public street, you can obtain a permit from those people. They also deal with many of the plumbing contractors and different contractors that come in.
With some exceptions, the developers, builders, and homeowners that come to the development center are finding that they are no longer required to make multiple trips to multiple floors in multiple buildings. Their reactions?
I think very favorable. We're learning every day how we can better serve our customers, but for the most part it's been a favorable reaction. We have a beautiful space here, and our staff is really trying to help customers as they come through the door as best they can.
We know that we're not perfect yet. You may still find a few glitches as you work your way through our system, but our staff have been working very hard, and they're continuing to work to improve the processes to make this the best development center in the country.